The day America woke up rich and went to bed broke, no sirens sounded. There was no war, no explosion, no enemy crossing borders, just numbers falling, screens bleeding red, accounts wiped clean, and more than $200 billion evaporating like it had never existed. That was the moment the modern world cracked. Not slowly, not politely, but all at once, without warning, without mercy. And to understand how something this massive collapsed this fast, you have to rewind to a time when Americans believed the impossible had become permanent, the early 1920s. The war was over, Europe was devastated, entire cities in ruins, but America was untouched, richer than ever, holding the world's gold, controlling production, exporting confidence along with goods. Factories that once built tanks and artillery now produced comfort, washing machines, refrigerators, radios, machines designed not just to work, but to promise a better future, a future that felt inevitable. Cities expanded upward instead of outward. New York's skyline rose year after year as if gravity had been suspended. Steel climbed higher, cranes dotted the horizon, and every new building felt like proof that the system worked. Jazz spilled from clubs into the streets, loud, fast, rebellious, the soundtrack of a nation convinced it had escaped history itself. The economy wasn't growing, it was roaring, and economists said the boom was permanent. Newspapers celebrated a new era where cycles were dead and prosperity was scientific. Henry Ford perfected the moving assembly line. What once took 12 hours of labor now took 90 minutes. Productivity exploded, costs dropped, wages rose, cars poured into the streets, transforming daily life. Roads expanded, suburbs formed. Oil, steel, rubber, glass, advertising all surged together, pulling the entire economy into overdrive. Radios entered millions of homes, and for the first time, the nation listened together. The same music, the same news, the same optimism, synchronized not just culturally, but emotionally. Yet while cities celebrated this new golden age, rural America was quietly collapsing. Farmers who had fed the nation during wartime prosperity saw crop prices fall year after year. Wheat, corn, cotton became almost worthless. Debt replaced profit. They borrowed to survive. Banks encouraged it. Machines promised efficiency. Tractors replaced horses. But instead of salvation, they delivered speed, speeding farmers toward foreclosure. And no one paid attention because the crisis didn't arrive in skyscrapers, it arrived in fields, and fields didn't make headlines. Meanwhile, urban America discovered a powerful new addiction, buying things it couldn't afford. Buy now, pay later became normal. Radios financed, cars financed, furniture financed, even clothing financed. Credit became invisible, painless, almost abstract. Banks handed out loans freely, assuming growth would cover everything tomorrow. And then Wall Street transformed speculation into a national sport. Margin loans allowed ordinary people to feel wealthy overnight. $10 down bought $100 in stock. Leverage magnified gains and hid risk, and stocks only seemed to move in one direction, up. Everyone knew it. Bankers, teachers, taxi drivers, secretaries, factory workers, barbers, shoeshine boys on street corners confidently shared stock tips, convinced insider knowledge was everywhere. Between 1924 and 1929, the Dow Jones Industrial Average quadrupled. Prices detached completely from reality. Companies were no longer valued for profits or productivity, but for momentum. Vibes replaced fundamentals. Holding companies owned other holding companies, which owned more holding companies. Layers of paper wealth built on borrowed money. Speculation feeding speculation. A financial echo chamber disconnected from the real economy. A few economists and bankers warned the system was unstable, but warnings sound boring during a party, and the party was loud. Champagne flowed freely, fortunes appeared overnight, and no one checks the floorboards when the music is still playing. Until October 29, 1929, Black Tuesday. The market didn't dip,
It didn't correct, it collapsed. Ticker tapes jammed from the volume of sell orders, paper spilled across trading floors, phones rang endlessly, traders shouted, some fainted where they stood. Panic fed panic. $14 billion vanished in a single day, more than $200 billion in today's money, erased in hours. Outside the New York Stock Exchange, crowds gathered in silence, staring at a building that suddenly looked like a tomb, trying to understand how wealth could disappear without fire or smoke. The Roaring Twenties didn't fade out, they slammed headfirst into concrete. Margin calls followed immediately. Brokers demanded repayment of loans investors couldn't possibly afford. Forced selling accelerated the collapse. Paper fortunes burned overnight. People who were rich on Monday were ruined by Thursday. Savings dissolved, dreams evaporated. And then the banks began to fail. Built on bad loans, leverage, and blind trust, thousands collapsed as depositors rushed to withdraw money that no longer existed. Panic spread town to town, state to state. Families stood in lines for hours, only to find locked doors and empty vaults, entire life savings erased with a stamp. The collapse refused to stay inside American borders. U.S. banks pulled loans from Europe to survive. Fragile economies, already weakened by war, imploded. Businesses failed. Currencies destabilized. Global trade collapsed by nearly 50% in just 3 years. Shipping slowed. Factories worldwide shut down. Yet leaders insisted the crisis was temporary. Newspapers printed optimistic headlines while reality unfolded in breadlines. People sold wedding rings, watches, coats, anything that could be exchanged for food. By 1931, the music was gone completely. Factories silent, smokestacks cold. Unemployment reached 25%. 1 in 4 Americans had no job. Millions more were underemployed. Bread lines stretched for blocks in every major city. Soup kitchens overflowed. Children fainted from hunger in classrooms. Schools closed. Savings disappeared. Dignity followed. Suicide rates surged. Marriages collapsed under pressure. Birth rates fell. The future became something people stopped talking about because talking about it hurt. And then the land itself turned against them. Years of aggressive farming and overproduction had stripped the soil of nutrients. Drought arrived, winds rose, and the Dust Bowl was born. Massive black storms rolled across the plains, blotting out the sun, killing crops, suffocating livestock. Families packed what little they had and fled west, chasing rumors of jobs that often didn't exist. Migrants crowded highways. Desperation traveled with them. President Herbert Hoover refused large-scale federal aid, believing recovery would come naturally. Instead, shanty towns formed on the edges of cities, built from scrap wood and metal, mocking symbols of despair known as Hoovervilles. Veterans of World War I marched on Washington demanding bonuses they had been promised, and were met with tear gas, cavalry charges, and fire. Americans watched their own government turn weapons on men who had once defended it. Trust fractured. Desperation bred radical ideas, not because people believed them, but because they needed anything that promised change. Crime surged. Banks became targets. Outlaws like John Dillinger became folk heroes, symbols of rebellion against a system that had failed. America wasn't just broke, it was broken. Until March 3, 1933, when Franklin Delano Roosevelt took office, inheriting a nation on its knees. He spoke directly to the people and told them the only thing they had to fear was fear itself. And then he moved faster than anyone expected. Banks were closed, inspected, and reopened under strict rules. Trust slowly returned. Emergency programs put millions to work, building roads, bridges, schools, dams, reshaping the country's infrastructure. Electricity reached rural towns that had lived in darkness. Regulations were written to restrain Wall Street. Speculation was limited. Social Security was created not to create wealth, but to prevent collapse, to ensure old age no longer meant starvation. Slowly, factories restarted. Confidence returned inch by inch. The Great Depression did not end with applause or celebration. It ended with work, discipline, endurance, and a collective decision to rebuild piece by piece. And just as America stood back up, scarred but standing, it failed to notice another storm forming beyond its borders, darker, louder, global. A storm fueled by anger, ideology, and unresolved collapse. A storm that would soon pull the entire world into something even worse.